The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. I am back, as you can see, for a little while, not for very long. Don't get used to this. Back on the road next week. Back on the road the week after that. So I'm going to be on the road a lot in the next month or so until mid-May. But for now, we're here. We're here for about a week, so we'll enjoy it. We'll do as many shows as we can during this week to try to catch up. We're way behind. It's already April, and we haven't had, I don't think we've had a single show in April. Maybe one. All right, Catherine is with us today. That's fantastic. So Catherine is here to keep track of the Super Chat. We got a stacked show today, a ton to talk about. We're going to talk about Elon Musk taking a stake in Twitter. We're going to talk about the war in Ukraine, Russia. I've got maps. I like maps. I don't know if you guys like maps, but I love maps. So we'll look at some maps, see what's happened in the war, give you an update. I get to say I told you so again. We'll talk about war crimes, what constitute war crimes, what they mean. We'll talk about the election in Hungary. Maybe I might delay that, might postpone that because it's a big topic. But we'll see. We'll see how today goes. And then there's, of course, 12th anniversary of Obamacare. Obama was at the White House today to celebrate 12th anniversary of Obamacare. Some of us cry, some of us weep. Obama and Biden celebrate. I am jet lagged, so if I'm fading, if I'm inarticulate, if I'm talking gibberish or anything like that, my brain is a bit of a mush from the jet lag. So it's late here. So we'll see how long we can go. We'll see how long I have energy and before I collapse and try to recover so we can do a show. We can do more shows this week. All right. Remind everybody, we use Super Chat here to ask questions. You can ask me questions about anything. Thank you, Jonathan, for getting us started. You can also support the show like Jonathan just did without asking a question. With the Super Chat, it's very simple. It's down there below, value for value. If you enjoy this show, show your support by using the Super Chat to support us. We have a target every show of $600. Catherine is here, and she is here to make sure you reach that target. We're way behind. We're starting April in a deep hole. So it would be good if we could exceed our targets for a few shows, get up to 1,000 or whatever, so that we can make up for the fact that I've been traveling and did not do as many shows as I would have liked. Yeah, March was a down month from a Super Chat perspective by about $2,000 because of the amount of traveling. I expect April and May are going to be down as well. And then June is Ocon. And then, yeah. Anyway, we're going to have to make up here. We're going to have to make up. So I appreciate the support you guys provide. And don't forget, you can ask questions, and $20 or more on a question gets priority. All right. So you probably heard yesterday it was that Elon Musk had bought 9.2% of Twitter stock. He is now the owner of 9.2%. I read somewhere how many billions of dollars that cost him. I don't know, but it cost him a lot of money. He's the largest shareholder of Twitter. He's a larger shareholder, significantly larger than the founder of Twitter and the former CEO, who owns about 2%. He is a larger shareholder of Twitter than many of the institutional members, the institutional investors. It's quite impressive that he's managed to accumulate 9.2. I haven't really pulled up a chart of Twitter stock. I don't know if you bought it cheap, bought it expensive. I mean, tech stocks have been driven down quite a bit over the last couple of months, over the last 3 months, so probably far from its peak. Wanda Freeman says that it cost him $4 billion to do it. Free trade has been a member for 2 months. I don't know. I don't think this counts as a super chat. Being a member is not good enough. It doesn't help you get to the 600 goal, as Catherine will note for you. But I will read what Free Trade says. He says, Musk is being hailed as a free speech champion on Twitter. In reality, he blocks people who destroy his anti-fossil fuel narrative. For example, Alex Epstein. So Musk is, his argument for going on Twitter is he wants to make it better. There's a lot of discussion about having an edit button so you can change your tweets after you post them. Also to eliminate some of the things that Twitter does, which takes people off the platform or puts them or forces them to delete tweets or so on. So he's going in there with his own agenda about how he thinks Twitter should be run. Now, today they announced that not only does he have 9.2% of Twitter stock, but today he was appointed to the board of directors. So Elon Musk is now going to be a power, a force within Twitter. Now, I have to say, this is beautiful. This is the beauty of finance. This is amazing. Put aside whether you agree with Musk or you don't agree with Musk. This could be George Soros for all you know, right? But the very fact that an individual can take a large position in a stock, get on a board of directors, influence the direction of a company, and fix perceived problems with it that might be hurting its market value is one of those amazing features of markets. One would hope that people do it, and the results are positive. The results consistent with what we would like them to be, right? But they might, if you're an advocate for Elon Musk taking a board seat and taking 9.2%, then what happens? Are you going to be offended when George Soros does the same thing and argues for a more leftist agenda for Twitter or for some social media company? The beauty of the fact that they are private means that shareholders can can buy into the platform, buy into the company. Shareholders can therefore change its policy. Shareholders can go on and determine the future of the company, and it's not static. I did an interview today with somebody who was arguing with me that, all these companies, all these social media companies are monopolies. And what do you do about monopolies? Well, here's what you do about monopolies. Buy their shares and kick out managers and change their behavior to be more, friendly, more profitable, we'll see. We'll see what Elon Musk actually does. We'll see what actually is motivating him. But one option, rather than compete, rather than spend the money to create a new platform that competes with Twitter, an alternative to that is to just buy and change it. And it might change for the good. It might change for the worse. I don't know. Musk seems to have the right inclinations. Hopefully it changes for the good. But it's just one more way in which one deals with, let's say, corporate behavior that we think is negative, that we think is bad. So Elon is using his billions. I guess the money he lost, the money he gained from selling a big stake of Tesla. Much of that money went to paying taxes, and some of that money has now gone into buying a big stake in Twitter and buying himself onto the board of directors of Twitter, and now having an influence on Twitter. And it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be really, really interesting. Does he manage to change the policies of Twitter? Twitter, does he move Twitter in a different direction? Is it better? Is it worse? Will the stock price respond by going up? Will it go down? Will it be political? Won't it be political? It's going to be really interesting. So I am eagerly anticipating watching how this plays out. But again, this is one of the beauties of private business, private markets, is that you get these kind of changes. Without any government intervention. Without government doing anything. Indeed, I would argue that government is preventing. Why? Anybody know why he stopped at like 9%? Why didn't take 12%? Or because you can accumulate up to 10% of a stock. Well, you really accumulate out of 5% of a stock. And then you have to disclose your interest. You have to let the world know that you bought the stock. If you accumulate over 10% of a stock, you have to let the world know your intentions. You have to file a complicated SEC form that tells the world why you own 10%. Now, before these regulations came into place, and the regulations around what are called 13Ds and 13Gs, which are the different filing requirements, the 13Ds and 13Gs were put in place in 1968. And they were put in place in 1968 by the SEC. These are regulations that make it impossible for somebody, for example, to accumulate 50% of a stock, walk into the CEO's office and fire them because they're the majority owner now, and basically replace the board because they own 51% of the company. Guess who lobbied to have those regulations put in place? Guess who wanted them in place? Guess who didn't want to get fired by people who accumulate 51% of the company's stock? Managers. Managers of big companies, managers of big corporations in America lobbied to have these regulations put in place in order to restrict the ability of people to take over their companies in a stealth way, in a way without everybody knowing, right? Imagine just buying 51% of the company stock on the market, in the open market, and then you're in control. Today, you can't do that. You have to buy 5, disclose, and then 10, disclose, and you have to do a tender offer. You actually have to let shareholders know, look, I want to buy 51% of the company. I'm going to pay you X. That allows competitors come in. Supposedly, this is good for shareholders because it creates a bidding war, but it also reduces the number of people who ever go into it. And it entrenches often bad managers. It often entrenches bad CEOs. So imagine a world in which Elon Musk, you woke up one morning and Elon Musk owned 51% of the company and basically had fired its management and was taking over. Can't happen today, sadly, but that's capitalism. You see, that's what a free market looks like. And it's things like that that suggest that we have no idea what business would actually be like under capitalism. We have no idea the dynamics of what it would be like, the competition, the insistence on managers to really try to maximize shareholder worth, because otherwise somebody's going to buy up the stock and fire them. Capitalism is so much more dynamic, so much more interesting, so much more focused than anything we see today. We do not have capitalism today. And that creates stagnation, it creates laziness, it incentivizes managers to not innovate, to not stay on the cutting edge, to not completely dedicate everything they can to making sure they maximize shareholder wealth. All right, as I said, I'm looking forward to Elon Musk, who is not woke, who is not politically correct, to see what kind of influence he can have on Twitter. I think it's exciting. I think it's a good day for social media. I think it's a good day for expression. Hopefully he opens up the platform. He allows more discussion, more debate, less sanctioning of people. And then maybe other social media platforms learn from that and take note of that. And if he's successful and the stock price goes up and people are happier with Twitter and he kind of eviscerates all the competition that is out there, even though it's marginal, then other social media will mimic him. And if he tells the politicians to go to hell, as he has done with the SEC on issues around Tesla and as he has with others, this could be a game changer. This could be a game changer. If we got the kind of sense of life and self-esteem of Elon Musk applied to social media companies, the world would be dramatically different. So let's see what happens. Jeffrey says, I'm delighted to see you live. I was distraught all March. Now I can smile again. Oh, no. I mean, you're not distraught. You're not smiling just because the Iran Book Show is on. But thank you. And I'm happy to bring a smile to your face. And I'll do as many shows as I can and still travel. I will be in New York next week, but alas, I will not have time to visit your restaurant. So sorry, it's kind of a quick in and out trip. All right. Update on the war. Update on the war. Yes. Ukraine, Russia, it's still going on. The Russians have not won yet. Indeed. It actually looks like they might be losing. Losing. Wonder why. So, as I told you from day one, this was not going to be a slam dunk for the Russians. All those military experts you saw everywhere else, that predicted Russian victory, overwhelming force, Ukrainians couldn't cope, modern army, superior tactics, superior equipment, fantastic military, fail. As I told you, the equipment sucks. Their strategy sucks. They have no motivation. Undisciplined army. And it looks like terrible strategy. So let's see the map. There's the map, all right? We get the map. This is the map as of the 28th of March. And you can see that over the month preceding this map, Russian armies advanced towards Kiev from both the north, the northeast, and the east. But they'd been stuck in these positions for over 2 weeks. Basically, most of the progress you see at the top of the map, in the center top, most of that red, that's what the red and the pink is what Russia had occupied after its invasion on 24th of February. Most of that had not changed much in 2 weeks. Indeed, the Russians who had thought they would have taken Kiev in the first few days, they thought they would have replaced the government in Kiev in the first few days and basically dominated Ukraine, or at least split it into half between the east and the west, and dominated the entire east of Ukraine. None of that happened. The Russians got bogged down in the outskirts of Kiev, both in the west, in the north, and the east. They never managed to encircle the city. Their tanks, as I predicted, not only got stuck in the mud, but more importantly, were super vulnerable to the anti-attack weapons that the Ukrainians had, the Western anti-attack missiles that they got from the US, from the UK, and other allies in the West. And the Russians were stuck for over 2 weeks in positions outside of Kiev, both to the east and to the west and to the north, never going south, never encircling. In the south, you can see that These purple is the areas that the Russians took in 2014. This is the Donbass region, and this is Crimea below. The red is the areas that they have occupied since February. You can see that while in the east here they had been targeting and trying to take Kharkiv, they had not managed to. Amazingly, the Ukrainians have withstood massive attacks by the Russians. Mariupol has not been completely taken, although it's completely surrounded. So it's basically taken by the Russians. But the resistance there is fierce, and the casualties on the Russian side are significant, as they are on the Ukrainian side. So Russia has achieved its goal of connecting Crimea with the Donbass and of taking much of the eastern boundary of Ukraine, bordering with Russia. But Russia has not taken the entire east of Ukraine. It has not taken the entire seashore of the Black Sea, which is what they intended. They have not taken Odessa in the south. They have not taken Mykolaiv, which is another strategic point in the Russians' attempt to take the south. In other words, a month and a bit into this campaign, there was no question that the Russians were bogged down, not advancing, and it achieved very few of their short-term, at least, objectives. They had not been able to dominate the Ukrainians. Pretty pathetic given the size, training, capabilities of the Ukrainian army. But the difference, I'd say the primary differences were two. One, in technology. The Russians were using Russian equipment, and the Ukrainians, for the most part, were using Western equipment, and the difference there is vast. And second, motivation. The Russians were there for what? For what? Unclear, unmotivated, uninspired. Whereas the Ukrainians were fighting for selfish reasons. The Ukrainians were fighting for their homes. They were fighting for their families. They were fighting for their land. They were fighting for their livelihood. They were fighting for their country, having been invaded. They were fighting in self-defense. They were fighting for selfish reasons. I'll take a selfishly motivated soldier any day over somebody who vaguely is fighting for some vague notion of a Mother Russia. And indeed, that's how we've seen it play out. So here's a map so this was the map on the 28th of March. And now we're going to switch to a map on the 5th of April. And you can see the big difference. The big difference is in the north and the northeast. Basically, Ukraine has reoccupied all of its territory in the north and northeast. All of the Russian fighters, equipment, tanks that were still operational, surrounding Kiev on the west, on the north, and on the east of Kiev are gone. They don't exist. Ukraine has taken back its borders all the way to Belarus, all the way to Russia in the east. Many battles were fought around Sumy. Sumy now is completely in Ukrainian hands. I mean, what you're seeing here is a complete retreat, a complete failure of Russia. They went from this map, look at all the red, look at all the pink in the upper right hand, to this map with no red, no pink. They basically completely failed. Yeah, they withdrew into Belarus to refuel, resupply, and where are they going to go? They're not going to go back towards Kiev. They failed there. They're not going to reconquer the same ground. And the fact that they have to go backwards to refuel suggests to you how bad their logistics are, suggests to you how completely incompetent their strategy is, how completely amateurish everything about this on the Russian side has been. Where is the infrastructure? Where are the supply chain routes? Where is the oil supply? None of it held up. They had to completely withdraw. So the Ukrainians have completely destroyed the Russians in the north and the northeast. They're completely gone. Now, the stories are that the Russians will then send their military forces that are left. About half of them have been disabled. Tens of thousands of men have been killed or wounded. About half the tanks, half the armored vehicles have been lost to the Russians in the northern front. So whatever's left of those northern armies will now be shipped by train from Belarus through Russia to the eastern front, to Donbass, to fight over the rest of, to solidify the gains in the east. I don't think they're going to expand much the territory under control, but they will solidify their presence in the areas where they have already. But this is stunning. Nobody predicted this. Nobody predicted that the Russians would lose, as they have in the north. They're still winning, arguably, in the south, because they've taken territory and they're occupying that territory. But Ukrainians are making small progress, even in these areas where the Russians dominate in the south. The Ukrainians are going to be able to resupply. The Ukrainians are going to be able to send troops from the Kiev area down to the south to try to retake some of the areas that they've lost. The Ukrainians are getting resupplied with the best American equipment, the best Western European equipment. What are the Russians resupplying themselves with? The same tanks, the same armored vehicles that we've been being destroyed in the north. They're going to get more of them in the south. Soldiers are still as unmotivated as ever, probably more so. Ukrainians are more motivated than ever, and this brings us to this issue of war crimes. The pictures out of the northern suburbs of Kiev are pretty horrific. Not surprising, but horrific. Men and women with their hands tied behind their back, shot at point-blank range. Women raped and then murdered. Hundreds of civilians killed. Civilians die in war. That's just a fact of war. And sometimes it's necessary for civilians to die in war. But to kill civilians in point-blank range after their hands are tied, to rape women and kill them, is just barbarism. It's barbarism. It's the behavior of an army with no morals. It is the behavior of an army with no scruples. It is a behavior of a barbaric regime. Of course, the Russians have denied it. The Russians are saying Ukrainians did it after the fact. The problem for the Russians is that there are satellite photos showing the bodies of killed civilians, showing the graves being dug, while the Russians were still occupying the area. So it cannot be that Ukrainians did it. Doesn't matter. The Russian propaganda machine is pumping it out. It's not us. We didn't do it. This is all Ukrainians. This is all pretense. This is all fake video. And of course, the mouthpieces in the West are repeating those stories. You find it on Twitter. You can find it on social media everywhere. The American right, the nationalist right, is repeating Russian talking points, justifying anything Russia says, does. And we're being exposed. We're seeing exposed. The barbarism that is this nationalist, authoritarian, yes, it's anti-woke ideology. This is what the new right represents. This is the kind of barbarism that so many of the right would like to see our country and countries of the West be part of. Russia today has become a symbol of a political ideology, the ideology of nationalism, of the ideology of a new right, an ideology of brute force, an ideology of muscle over mind. But it's anti-left, so they must be good guys. I think some of the most disgusting things I've seen are the attempts of the American right to justify Russian actions. And that these are the people who are going to win elections and be our leaders of the future. It's shocking. It's scary. It's something I've been warning you of for a long, long time. But here it is. It's right here in front of us. Putin, the darling of the right, is acting like a Bronze Age barbarian. I'd expect the Bat Boys to be happy and celebrating, but the fact that there are so many on the right that are celebrating this is truly disgusting. There was a conference held by the New Right recently in New York about Putin and Russia and how the New Right should relate given the war in Ukraine. Of course, the ultimate war crime that Putin committed was going to war. War is the ultimate war crime. War that is unnecessary, war that is initiated, war that is to conquer. Whoa, Ashton. Takes us all the way to $600. Wow. All right, I will get to your question very soon, promise. Ashton put in $599.99. It is the initiation of force that is the true war crime. But then, to load up on a crime like that, and then kill people irrespective, kill people unnecessarily, kill people gratuitously, it's just the depths of barbarism. And that Germany, for example, continues to buy $500 million worth of natural gas from, or $1 billion, the numbers, they keep presenting different numbers, of gas from Russia every day. Every day. And that's not going to stop. Supporting a barbaric regime, supporting a regime that does this, truly horrific. Wanda Freeman says the alt-right is a tiny minority, but is it? Is it? I mean, I don't know, alt-right, new right, I don't know how you want to categorize these modern barbarians. But the fact is that today there was a big demonstrations in Berlin. There was pro-Putin flying Russian flags. The fact is that on Sunday, I think it was on Sunday or Monday, Viktor Orban won a massive victory in Hungary. He got 2/3 of the parliamentary vote, and he won won by a margin of 15 points or more. A huge margin, a margin nobody expected. And he ran on a campaign that was pro-Russia. Yes, he has agreed with the EU for sanctions against Russia, but at the same time, the campaign was clearly pro-Russia. And the Hungarians are generally pro-Russia. Not a few, not a little bit. So it is truly, and then we have idiots like Matt Tech Kant here on the chat defending Russia barbarism. So maybe it's not such a tiny minority if they seem to pop up in every place. They seem to demonstrate in Berlin. They seem to vote for Orban. And in Russia itself, you should see the interviews they do with people in Russia who are completely 100% supportive. The relatives of Ukrainians who, when Ukrainians call them up, say, no, that cannot be, that's not happening in Ukraine. Russians don't do that. And if we did do that, then it's justified. We had to do it. We had no choice. And it's all a conspiracy theory anyway. No, I don't know that the new right, the alt-right, is so small. And certainly, there's significant numbers of them on the intellectual right today. Significant number of Russia justifiers on the new right. Indeed, right now, the radical right and the radical left agree. The far-out left, the wacky left, loves Russia, and the wacky right loves Russia. I told you always, there's no big difference between them. So, no, I mean, these are scary times, not because I think Russia is a threat to the United States. It is not. But because of the number of people pandering to Vladimir Putin, the number of people on his side, the number of people who think he's a man's man, the number of people who think that the way to deal with the left, our problems, that's the same thing, I think, is by force, is by use of violence. The number of smear campaigns being initiated out there in Zelensky. Oh, Richard here, I'm still waiting for Richard's apology for calling me names and telling me I didn't know what I was talking about when on the first day of this war I said that Russia was going to have a hard time winning it. I'm waiting, Richard, anytime you're ready. Scary times. But remember that the war crimes are horrific, but the real war crime, or the most important war crime, all of these are horrific, is initiating war. Putin is truly evil to have a regime that supports the kind of brutality that he has endorsed, supported, and is now covering up. And anybody who supports Putin here is part of that criminality. All right, let's see. Ashton for $500. Wow. Have you ever read The Dark Enlightenment by Nick Land? If yes, what do you think about his philosophy of accelerationist capitalism compared to Ayn Rand's version of unknown ideal? I have not read The Dark Enlightenment. I'm sorry. I'll have to look it up. But I'll take a look at it. But generally, I have no idea what accelerationist capitalism would be. And, we know, or at least I'm a supporter, as you know, of capitalism as described in The Unknown Ideal. But the Dark Enlightenment sounds a little spooky to me, but I will have to read about it. I'll have to see what that means. Oops, let's get rid of the map. I'll have to see what that means. The Enlightenment was mostly light. The Enlightenment was mostly positive. The Enlightenment was one of the great periods in human history. And the Enlightenment is what it's, the better things that are happening today, the things that are good, are products of the Enlightenment, the actual Enlightenment. All right, I'll do one other super chat, and then we'll go on to maybe just say a word about Obamacare, and then we'll move full time into super chat mode. Wes Stewart says, "What do you think the chances are the Washington Post will publish that smear of Alex Epstein? It was supposed to be published last week and has yet to appear." I don't know. I have no idea. I'm glad it has not appeared. Maybe so. This is a smear again that the Washington Post was writing against Alex Epstein, the climate change, pro-fossil fuel Alex Epstein, the former ARI scholar. And Alex wrote a response. Alex made it public what they were about to publish. There was quite a bit outcry against it. The Washington Post had no leg to stand on in terms of the actual the content, the smear. It was clearly a smear. It was not an issue of interpretation. It was just a smear. So one would hope that editors in the Washington Post decided that it wasn't didn't make that they would not publish it, that it wasn't worth it. Clearly, it was an attempt to discredit Alex before his book came out. I have no idea. I'm hopeful, and I don't think it's out of the question that they will not publish it because they've realized it is groundless. We will see. Maybe I am being too nice, or expecting good things from mainstream media. Who knows? Oh wow, people on the chat are really getting into it. Wow. I don't know if they're attacking me or attacking each other. I have no idea, but it's getting ugly on the chat. Getting ugly. You guys who are not on the chat are missing out on some real ugliness over here. All right. I did want to say something about Hungary's Orban. I'll say more about it in the future, but he did win a decisive victory. I think what he showed in his victory, in spite of the fact that the European Union was backing the opposition in a sense, the polls were showing a tight race, but I think polls that were biased. I think what his victory really shows is that people like authoritarian nationalists. Orban is not quite as big of an authoritarian as Putin. There are still elections. As far as I can tell, the elections are, quote, fair in Hungary. It is a member of the EU and a member of NATO. But the entire media apparatus in Hungary is controlled by Orban. He has basically taken over the media explicitly. The economy is a crony economy where just like the oligarchs, where all the juicy positions are all held by friends of Orban. He is a populist. Viktor Orban is a populist, religionist. I don't know that he's really religious, but he uses it. A populist, authoritarian, little thug. He's not quite Putin. He's like a miniature. He doesn't have the apparatus that Putin has to inflict pain on people he doesn't like. Not a good guy. Not a good guy. Doesn't hold good ideas. Doesn't understand what Western civilization is. Doesn't know how to protect it, how to defend it. Somebody who's taken over the media, doesn't believe in free speech, doesn't really believe in freedom, has now made Hungary a free market at all, has basically used his platform, used the fact that he's part of the EU to receive enormous subsidies to help the Hungarian economy come out of poverty, but is far, far, far away, far, far, far from believing in free markets or believe in freedom in any dimension. He's completely and utterly corrupt. And yet, the Hungarian people love him. So there's no question he's popular. There's no question he won this election democratically. There's no question that the Hungarians support him. And as such, it is suggestive that there are elements in Europe, I think in the US, because Orban is a favorite of the US right. He's a favorite of people like Tucker Carlson and the intellectuals of the new right, that longs for the muscle, longs for authoritarianism. But he has a significant majority of Hungarians supporting him. These ideas are popular, can be dominant. It's not the case that they are minority views everywhere. And the thing that unites the people who vote for it is hatred of the left, and what they get instead is authoritarianism of the right. All right, let's see. So it's a little bit about Orban. I've got more to say about Orban, but we'll leave it for another show. I want to show clips of the Tucker Carlson interview with Orban. I think that's very reflective. Just quickly, it's 12 years to Obamacare. One of the worst pieces of legislation ever to pass in the United States. Right after the New Deal and the Great Society, Obamacare was a massive expansion of the welfare state, massive expansion of government intervention in healthcare. It drove up price, lowered accessibility to those of us who had insurance, to those of us who had, some of the world's best healthcare before Obamacare. The quality of the healthcare has deteriorated since. So, I would, it is a sad day. Of course, it was celebrated today at the White House. And of course, one of my biggest knocks on Trump was that he failed. I mean, his whole presidency was a failure, but he failed at getting rid of Obamacare. He failed to replace Obamacare with something better. I mean, and he failed because what he really wanted, and what he said often, was that he wanted was universal health care. Trump wanted more than Obamacare. He wanted even more socialized health care. But he did not manage to rally the Republicans around defeating Obamacare, and he never proposed an alternative to Obamacare, a move towards greater privatization of health care. So Republicans have failed. They failed to stop Obamacare originally, and then they failed to repeal Obamacare. And it is a black mark in the Republican Party. They came so close, and they had the opportunity. Remember, Trump controlled for 2 years presidency, the House, and the Senate. There's a lot that could have been done to either make Obamacare inoperable or to repeal it completely, and ideally to replace it with something better. But he didn't do it. Republicans didn't do it. A travesty. All right. Remembering Obamacare. One of the biggest issues when I travel around Europe is always that people tell me, you see, private healthcare doesn't work. Look at the United States. And I have to go through the fact that we in the United States have a heavily socialized healthcare system. Indeed, if you're over 65, you have socialized healthcare. If you're poor, that's Medicare. If you're poor, you have Medicaid, which is socialized healthcare. And if you're not poor, but you're not rich, you're low middle class, you have Obamacare, which is kind of socialized healthcare, but not quite. It's subsidized, and it's controlled, and it's regulated. And the fact that the United States is not a private healthcare market. So that's the biggest challenge I face when talking about healthcare, is that people think that the American system is a free market system. All right, let's go to some of the super chats. We'll start with $20 ones and relevant. Okay, James says, for years, Ukraine has been known primarily for kleptocracy and far-right neo-Nazis. Now, weeks later, it's a heroic beacon of liberal democracy. Putin sucks, but admitted Ukraine is more far-right than Hungary. No, I've been to Ukraine. I've been to Hungary. I don't know where you get your news, James, but I've actually been to Ukraine. I've talked to Ukrainian people. I've given talks in Ukraine. And while Ukraine is certainly a kleptocracy and has been a kleptocracy, but as is Russia, but Russia is worse, much worse. And Hungary is much more developed. Hungary is much more Western in some regards than Ukraine in terms of corruption. But the difference is that now Hungary presents itself as Western, part of the EU, part of NATO, and is still a kleptocracy, which in a sense is worse, and authoritarian, which is Orban. But no, Ukraine was a corrupt, new struggling democracy under the boot of Putin that kept intervening and placing his thugs at the head of it. And once in a while, the Ukrainians voted in somebody who opposed Putin. They didn't survive for very long. They had several internal revolutions. But the Ukrainian people are people who are basically Western. I think Zelensky was trying to do away with corruption, but it's almost impossible given the forces arrayed against him. But far-right neo-Nazis is bullshit. I mean, Zelensky, who is a Jew, won 70% of the vote. Neo-Nazis don't vote for Jews. I don't know where you get this stuff. There was one brigade, the brigade in the southeast, that for a while included significant members who are neo-Nazis. Maybe they still do, but it was never a majority. It was never a significant part of the Ukrainian military. It was never part of Ukrainian politics. There was no neo-Nazi political party that ran in Ukrainian politics. So the description of Ukraine as neo-Nazi is just ridiculous and just untrue. So while the neo-Nazi elements in the Ukrainian military, there are neo-Nazi elements in the Russian military, in all over Russia, you see neo-Nazi symbolism, you see neo-Nazi tattoos. Russian special forces often have neo-Nazi insignia. Then if you add to that, there are neo-Nazis in Germany. There's a political party in Germany that actually has a significant neo-Nazi past that did, I guess, okay in a recent election. The neo-Nazis in Hungary, there's certainly neo-Nazis in Poland, significant numbers of neo-Nazis in Poland. So what? The neo-Nazis in the United States. But Ukraine neo-Nazis did not have political power. It's just a Putin talking point, mindless talking point, unresearched. The Azov battalion is a battalion among many battalions. Yes, there are neo-Nazis in the Azov battalion, as I said, as there are neo-Nazis in the Russian special forces. Zelensky himself is a Jew. Remember that. Neo-Nazis, Jews don't go together. All right. Let's see. I mean, you guys can attack Ukraine all you want, but in comparison to Putin, however bad Ukraine was and is, it's Snow White in comparison. Ukraine did not start a war. Ukraine did not, invade a foreign country. Ukraine, as far as we know, has not killed massive numbers of civilians with their hands tied, has not raped large numbers of women. Now, maybe if Ukrainians had invaded Russia, we would be talking a different talk. But the fact is, Russia invaded Ukraine. That's just a fact. Had no territorial claim, has no justification, has zero rationale. It is the bad guy. Unequivocally the bad guy. You want to justify them by putting down the Ukrainians? That's absurd and ridiculous. And yes, in comparison to Putin, and given that Putin is on the attack, Ukraine is fighting for the West, given that Putin is the enemy of the West. By his very nature, Putin is the enemy of the West. And if Ukraine is a mob state, then Russia is a mob state on steroids. You know, Putin is the richest man in the world, probably. Because of what technology did he invent? What business did he buy? Did he build? Did he manage? None. He's a politician who's the richest man in the world. Does that not tell you everything you need to know about how corrupt and evil this man is? Russia is a poor country. On a per capita GDP, it is poorer than any country in Western Europe. By far, not even close. Oh, James Taylor says, the Jewish bankers are controlling Ukraine and me. I am being controlled by Jewish bankers. Maybe. I don't think James has thought of this. But maybe I'm the Jewish banker, because I'm in finance, you know. Maybe I'm the Jewish banker controlling Ukraine and all of you. As you ponder that, let me answer this $50 Canadian question. Turns out there's a Freedom Party which holds objectivist views here in Ontario, Canada. I'm contemplating joining. What do you think should be the primary focus of an aspiring objectivist politician? I mean, look, I think the primary focus of aspiring objectivist politicians is education. You're not going to get elected unless you educate the public about our ideas. You won't get elected unless you educate the public about the proper role of government, about individual rights, about capitalism. So I would say, as always, just like an aspiring objectivist in really any field, if you care about politics, if you want to change the world, then what you should be doing is educating. Educating. The actual politics of it, leave that for later. Landon says, can you give me a loan, Jewish banker? Well, it depends. One, are you Jewish? Second, you know, are you willing to participate in my conspiracy? I'll only give you a loan if you vote for the people I tell you to vote for, and if you help me supply weapons to ferment turmoil in the world so we can take it over. So Landon, I'm waiting to hear whether that is something you can do or not. It's pretty amazing. Here on my wall, we get the anti-Semites. I guess they always come here, right? It's not new. All right, let's see. James says, UAE is doing things that made Singapore thrive. Do you think U.S. government will make it harder to leave for productive people? What do you think about other countries looking to bring wealthy people to live in their country? I mean, UAE is doing some of what made Singapore thrive, but not all of it. Landon says he's game. Well, then the loan is yours, of course. The loan is yours. UAE is doing some of the things that made Singapore thrive. It's far more restrictive than Singapore, and it's certainly, if you're a woman, it's not quite as easy to do business in UAE as it was in Singapore. And I think culturally, UAE still has a long way to go. It also is trying to balance its act by still UAE and the rest of the Gulf states supporting Islamic jihadis, and at the same time is presenting a westernized, pro-free market, pro-openness, external stance. So we will see how UAE, how close it becomes to Singapore, how real the efforts they are making are. I hope they are, but we will see. Let's see. Do you think U.S. government will make it harder to leave for productive people? They already are. If you want to give up your passport, the American passport, they will tax you. They will tax you on what they think you will save in taxes by going to a tax haven. They will tax you on your existing assets. It used to be easy to give up your American passport. It has become super difficult to give up your American passport. And that is a way of making it harder for productive people to leave. By the way, the U.S. government is one of the few governments in the world, much worse than the European governments, for example, the taxes worldwide income. So if you leave and go and live in Singapore, Singapore has lower taxes than the US, you will pay American taxes on the difference. So you will not be able, you cannot escape federal taxes anywhere in the world, except in Puerto Rico. What do you think about all the countries looking to bring wealthy people to live in their country? I mean, I think it's great. They realize, I think, the wealthy people, generally productive people, but also wealthy people, invest in their local economies, spend in the local economies, and therefore contribute to the local economies. So I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. All right, let's see. James Taylor. Do people think the Holocaust was bad because only a select group of people were murdered while others were spared, categorized as superior? If everyone were murdered equally, would people not view it as such an abomination? I think the fact that it was based on a racist ideology, in a sense, makes it, people view it as worse. I think people would have viewed it as horrible no matter what, given that, it wasn't just killed during a war, but it wasn't even just massacred in the streets. It was an industrialization of mass murder. It was the industrialization of the killing of millions of people. I think no matter who would have gone into the ovens of Auschwitz, where, no matter what the group was, no matter who the people were, it would have been viewed in horror and as a particular low point in human history, because it was so industrialized. It was so systematic. The fact that it was done in the name of a superior race, at the margin, at the very little margin, makes it worse, but, it has to be done in the name of something. It's always done in the name of something. It's always done in the name of some superiority. Nobody goes in and just randomly kills people. They generally kill people in the name of something, in the name of ideology. And that ideology, in this case, was racism. In the case of communism, it's communism. But there's always an ideology that drives the mass murder. But racism is a particular form of abomination. It's one of the most primitive, disgusting, horrible ideas that human beings have ever come up with. And therefore, the Nazis have a special place in hell. From my perspective, that place in hell is shared with the communists. But, most of the popular culture, I think, doesn't know as much about the horrors of communism because our intellectuals don't teach it. And they still associate, because of altruism, they still associate communism with a noble ideal, whereas there's nothing noble about the Nazi ideal, right? All right, let's see. Dave says, do New Yorkers remind you of Israelis? Yeah, a little bit. New York is an introduction to going to Israel, so you get a little flavor of, but Israel is New York, on steroids. So it's more obnoxious, it's ruder, it's faster, it's tougher. Michael asks, was altruism designed to fuel evil? Without altruistic energy, I don't see how evil leaders can achieve and sustain power. I don't see it as good intentions, bad results. I think it was nefarious intent from its outset. But I think, yes, I think altruism was primarily an ideology for control. If you make people believe that their moral purpose is to live for other people, then you can control them more because the other people have moral claim against them, and therefore they're easier to manipulate, easier to control. So it is an issue of power. I don't think it was that people said, it fuel evil in the sense of fuel power over other people. It's also true that the whole idea of egoism, the whole idea of self-interest is an achievement. It's only the cultures like Greece and the Enlightenment and Ayn Rand that came up with anything close to it, right? So it is truly an achievement to have an ideology that is focused on self-interest. And almost maybe because of our tribal origins, almost all of morality before the Greeks and after the Greeks has been, in one way or another, altruistic, in a sense of placing the well-being of the group above the well-being of individual and demanding the individual sacrifice for the group or for some other cause. All right, let's see. Shaley, why do so many economists have issues with Austrian economics? Are there legitimate issues in the way they approach economics? Tricky question. I mean, I think most economists have issue with Austrian economics because they disagree with its premises, they disagree with the way, with its methodology, and they disagree with the conclusions. Austrian economics is overwhelmingly free market economics, and most economists start with a bias against free markets. But it's also true that economics has become, over the last 100 years, mathematical. And one of the things that Austrian economics argues against is mathematical economics. And many of today's economists dismiss Austrian economics because it's not mathematical. They only count mathematical economics as economics. So what is economics has shrunk over time in the mainstream to become dominated by mathematics, modeling on the one side, and empiricism on the other side. Colleen asks, what are people referring to when they suggest Ukraine is lying? I don't follow this close enough to understand any mildly reasonable defense of Russia's action. Oh, what they're saying is that Ukraine is making stuff up about, for example, the bombing of civilians. They claim that Ukraine was making stuff up when it said it was destroying all those Russian tanks. Funny that the Russians retreated. Maybe they retreated out of the goodness of their heart. Maybe that was the plan all along, was to retreat. It was never to occupy Kiev. That's what they'll tell you, of course. The Ukrainians are lying when it comes to the war crimes, the killing of civilians, the rape and pillage that has happened. All of that is Ukrainian lies. It's fake videos, all to make the Russians look bad. The Russians were justified in attacking Ukraine, we are told, because Ukraine was going to join NATO, and Russia viewed NATO as a threat, and Russia was going to put nuclear weapons right on the border with Ukraine, and Ukraine had to do something, and because Russia had to do something, and because Ukraine wouldn't compromise, and because Ukraine was run by a bunch of neo-Nazis, all Russia did was enter in order to cleanse Ukraine from the evil forces and to make sure that the evil NATO did not occupy Ukraine and attack Russia from its land. I think that's pretty much it. I think I captured the essence of the point of view that thinks that Russia are the good guys and Ukraine are the bad guys. Ori asks, can you recommend any books on business strategy? Not really. I mean, I suggest that the best books on business strategy are probably written by former businessmen. So I would read the books by successful businessmen of the past. But I don't have any specific. Oh, there was one guy. Let me see if I can easily find the book. I think Ram Shram, something like that. Yeah, I don't think I kept that book. But no, I don't, and I don't necessarily have any particular expertise in being able to tell you who to read on the business strategy side. Sorry, Ori. Corey says, is perfection too mystical a concept? I myself use it colloquially, but philosophically, can this be a dangerous concept? I myself would prefer the term flawless. No, perfection is, because perfection is not some otherworldly world of forms creation. Perfection is the best possible to a particular individual, the best possible within a particular context. Perfection comes into relevance in objectivism, where pride is the pursuit of perfection, moral perfection. One can pursue moral perfection, and one can be morally perfect. that means one is rational. That's what it means to be morally perfect. So, no, I don't think it is. I think it is very doable, very realistic concept, very this worldly concept, if you understand it as such, if you don't try. And flawless is more mystical, because flawless means no flaws. No flaws in what context? You get the same issue. What is a flaw? So I like the word perfection, and I like moral perfection as the terminology for pride. All right, we're at $895. $105 would get us to 1,000, which was a new goal for the beginning of the month. We're gonna try to get to a few months where we get to 1,000, so that we can kind of get back into the groove of things in terms of super chat funding of the Yaron Brook Show. We're a little behind for the month. We're a little behind. We were behind for March, and we're definitely behind for April. So if we can get to 1,000 today, that will help us reduce that lag. So somebody can come in and do $100. That'd be terrific. Get us there, and I'll shut up. All right, John Wayne says, do you think Russia has ever changed philosophically since the collapse of the USSR? What about Germany? Berliners in majority voted to seize non-binding housing rentals September of last year. Do you think Russia's changed philosophically since collapse? I don't think Russia's changed philosophically since the Tsars. I don't think Soviet Union was that big of a change. They changed from one type of authoritarianism, one type of mysticism, one type of pessimism to another, one type of suffering to another, one type of sacrifice to another. So I don't think that Russia has really changed philosophically in a few hundred years. Soviet Union, the communist Soviet Union was not that different, maybe more murderous, but not that different than the Tsars before the Soviet Union. And today's Putin's Russia is not that different. I mean, it's freer than the Tsars' Russia or the USSR, but in essential darkness, malevolence, and authoritarianism, not that much different. What about Germany? Yeah, Germany's changed. There's no question Germany's changed. The fact that they seized, the fact that the market in Germany is not free, the fact that they are controlling rents and controlling housing rentals and all of that. I mean, in America, we froze, Trump. You remember this? Trump froze all rents. That was the Trump administration during COVID. So I don't think that's enough to condemn the Germans to fascism or to authoritarianism yet. Colleen gave us $99.99, basically put us over the $1,000 mark. Thank you, Colleen. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. Michael says, will Canada become authoritarian? I think Canada will come as a little bit more authoritarian than the United States, and seems to constantly stay a little ahead of the United States in the march to authoritarians. Theme Master says, I do actually have 100. Thanks for your shows. Wow. Thank you, Theme Master. That puts us at 1,100, even better. So that's fantastic. Thanks, guys. We've made a goal for the day. I think I've covered all the $20 questions. So look, the essential is that the philosophy of mysticism, the philosophy of authoritarianism, the philosophy of altruism still dominates the world, still dominates the United States, still dominates Europe. And while it does, we might have ups and downs of relatively more free, relatively less free movements, slow movements towards authoritarianism, and maybe some periods of brutal authoritarianism. As long as those philosophies control, the philosophy of altruism, the philosophy of collectivism, the philosophy of authoritarianism, of a mixed economy, then we will continue to have this roller coaster ride politically. So it's not like Russia has changed philosophically. It's not like Germany has changed philosophically dramatically. They're less authoritarian, but they're not dramatically different. the real scary thing is not Europe. The real scary thing is how much more similar the United States has become to that European philosophy than it was in the past. Michael asks, I think Putin's a lot more suicidal than you do. People under that much stress and paranoia would employ nuclear weapons if he thought his regime were crumbling. Would Hitler have used nukes if he had the option? I think Hitler would. I think Putin might. I think the people around Putin won't let him. I don't think they're suicidal, even if he is. And even around Hitler, I think they would have tried to stop him. Whether they would have been successful or not, I don't know. All right, James G. Are there kids' books or TV shows for objectivism? No, but it's not clear what those would look like. What you want for kids is things that portray reality as it is, things that are heroic. Dave Goodman says, if you predict the exact month you get 35,000 subscribers, I will donate $500. Okay, there's nothing to lose here. 35,000. I predict I will be at 35,000 in June. Yeah, in June. We're April now, so I've got April and May to get to June. So June is 35,000 subscriber month. If we make it earlier, I lose Dave's $500, but I gain 35,000 a month earlier. So, you know, what you want with kids is just good stuff. Good stuff that's, particularly the younger they are, the more concrete bounded what you want to make it. The older they get, the more heroic, the more romantic you want to get them. You want to get romantic literature, which is heroic. I worry about objectivist themed books. I worry about the quality. What happened at private universities? It appears the government is entangled in each university in America and all the countries are the same. Yes, there is no such thing as a private university. There are two who don't receive any government money, Hillsdale and maybe one other one, Hillsdale in Michigan. But basically, the government, through student loans and through research grants and through everything else, basically dominates and controls higher education completely. Michael says, the way conservatives trigger liberals, objectivists should trigger conservatives. We're trying. Liam Miller says, Yuan is the best general thinker alive today. Thank you, Liam. I appreciate that. Michael said, I've spoken to some very wealthy people, and they tell me $10 million isn't really FU money. They said once you hit $10 million, it's like being the tallest short guy in the room. Who cares? Who cares about two things in your statement? One, who cares what wealthy people think? I don't. About my FU number. And who cares if you're the shortest guy in the room? The tallest short guy in the room. Who cares? Wealth is not an issue of comparison with other people. My FU number is a simple number. I'm pretty happy with how much money I spend every year. I don't need to spend more. My life doesn't need for me to spend a lot more. I want to have that money available to me whether I earn a living or not. $10 million of money in the bank would result in that. So that's all I care about. I mean, the idea that somebody else can tell you what your FU number is ridiculous. For some people, the FU number might be $1 million. Nobody else can decide that for you. Absolutely nobody. Because it depends on what you are trying to achieve, what FU means to you. So it's all a question of, you know, if you want a private jet, $10 million is not enough. You want a big yacht, $10 million is not enough. If you spend $1 million a year, $10 million is probably not enough. I don't want any of those things. I don't want to spend $1 million a year. It's completely 100% personal. Michael says, I had a professor tell us people who don't want to pay taxes are antisocial. How sick is that? Very sick. People who don't want to pay taxes are people who don't want their money used for purposes that they don't want it used for. James G says, why is Russia not using more air and naval strikes? Because they're I don't know why they're not using more Navy strikes, but the air is because the airplanes are not very good. They get shot down by ground-to-air missiles. They don't have the kind of electronic capabilities that the Israeli military has to divert ground-to-air missiles away from them. They're sitting ducks in those planes. The Ukrainians have shot down a stunningly large number of Russian airplanes. As I told you in day one of this war, Russian equipment sucks. I think that's a technical thing. Michael says, you said your parents never wanted you to stand out and not be too smart. Why was that? Because, well, they're egalitarians. They were egalitarians, at least. I don't know about today. There's certainly egalitarian streak. Don't want to be different. Don't want to be better. Don't want to stand out. You want to be everything the same. That's egalitarianism. Rachel asks, do you have plans to watch Pachinko? It is very similar to Mr. Sunshine. It's not fully out yet, but the latest episode was incredible. Highly recommend it. Who made it? You know, where can you watch it? Pachinko. I'll look it up. I never heard of Pachinko. We've got a $20 question. One second. Great Jewish banker, can I have some money in order to establish a neo-Nazi regime so that way I can own the National Conservatives? In all seriousness, I appreciate you dunking on these conspiracy cranks. My pleasure, anytime. All right, let's see. Liam says, I'm seriously missing your 4-day-a-week regular show schedule. Don't do this to us again. Sorry, but until the end of May, it's going to be iffy. It's going to be iffy. So I appreciate you guys' support, and I appreciate you guys liking the 4 days a week, and I will try to do as many of those shows as I possibly can. Hopper Campbell, does feeling empathy for less fortunate somehow take away from pursuit of your rational self-interest? No, I mean, it depends on why they are less fortunate, what less fortunate means, how much you let that empathy take your life over. But it's absolutely fine to feel bad about the fact that some people have rotten luck, or that the system has screwed them, or that they happen to be born in circumstances where they cannot be they cannot be successful. So I don't think that's bad at all. I mean, it's empathy is not destructive to you unless you let it dominate, unless you let it overwhelm you, unless you let it guide your actions. Landon says, it seems like more people are against Russia here than they were against the Soviet Union through much of the 1900s. Is that not an improvement? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is, but remember, part of that is because that Putin is considered an authoritarian of the right, and therefore the left is against him. If he was an authoritarian of the left, would they rally against him like they have now? Right? I doubt it. Remember, the left has the moral high ground. So authoritarianism of the left is always viewed with sympathy. Look at Venezuela even. Normative Randroid, would you recommend Treasury bonds or municipal bond as good investments currently? I can't make investment recommendations, I'm sorry. But I would say any bonds are tricky right now because, unless you have a real grasp on where inflation's heading, is it heading up, is it heading down, are long-term rates going up, are long-term rates going down? I think long-term rates are going to go up, and I think bonds are going to be, you're going to lose money in bonds, right? If you think inflation is here for a while and it might increase, then inflation-adjusted bonds are the right way to go. But if you think the Fed is going to overreact to inflation and therefore you're going to have a recession and a collapse of inflation, then maybe long-term bonds are the right way to go. Municipals are good if you're in a high tax bracket because their interest is tax deductible, or you don't pay taxes on the interest income. Stephen Lamb, is $10 million enough to own an Aston Martin? If not, better bump it up. Yeah, I think it is enough. If you want to own an Aston Martin, I think $10 million is enough to own it. Michael Sanders, can you become a billionaire if you have an IQ under 150? Yeah, I'm sure you can. I don't know the stats, but I know that Nassim Taleb has done mentioned some regression analysis that shows that there's not a strong correlation between IQ and wealth. That is, IQ does not predict wealth, that you can become very, very wealthy even though you have a low IQ, and you can be quite poor even though you have a high IQ. So I don't think that core IQ, there's a lot of other aspects to intelligence that might be more relevant to becoming a billionaire than what the IQ test measures. Free Trade says, good to have you back on the air you're on. If the U.S. leaves NATO, presumably Europe will increase military spending significantly, including a lot more nuclear weapons. Thoughts? All good. I'm good for that. I don't know how much military spending they will increase. They'll increase some. I don't think they'll increase a huge amount. But there's absolutely no reason the U.S. should be in Europe. There's absolutely no reason the U.S. should be part of NATO. The U.S. should be maybe aligned with Canada because we're in the same geographic area and share the same threats, but I don't see that we need to be aligning ourselves with Europe. Europe gaining nuclear weapons, it already has them. France and Britain have them. I think other European countries might or might not adopt nuclear weapons. I don't think it matters that much. Cobb, any movie, TV, or novel you consumed recently that you liked? God, my memory is blanking out. I mean, I've been watching the various Vikings TV shows. Very bloody, lots of battles. But I fast forward through the battles. I like the stories. Viking Valhalla, which is one on Netflix, which is a sequel to the Viking series that used to be on. And then there's another one that just ended, the fifth season, and the whole series has ended, whose name I forgot. I haven't watched anything. I am watching right now the series set. All right, I'm going to keep this question, and I'm going to get back to you next time, because jet lag has made my mind mush in terms of remembering these names, and I'll write down a few recommendations that I have for next show, Cobb. I apologize, but I'm just too out of it. All right. I will see you all Thursday, definitely Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. There'll be shows Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. I might try to squeeze in a Wednesday or Friday show just to make up for the fact that we haven't done many shows this month and the fact that next week is going to be problematic. But you can expect for certain Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Oh, and before I leave, we are having a front row event. Front row events are small events, maximum 14 people. The next one will be on Saturday, April 9th at around, I think it's 2 o'clock Eastern time. It's going to be about self-esteem. So it's basically me doing a presentation and in an intimate setting, only 14 of us. Well, maybe it's more than 14. Yeah, it's 14. And you guys asking questions. It's $100 a person. So it's a great, for those of you who put a lot of money into the Super Chat, because this is an opportunity. We'll all be on Zoom. It's not public. You can ask me about anything. We can have a conversation. It's much more seminar-like, and it's a lot of fun, and it's all about self-esteem. You can sign up. The link is on the chat. Is pinned on the chat at the top. It's a webinar registration, and you can pay there. And self-esteem. Hey, it's a great topic. So I think we've got 8 slots available. I think 6 people have signed up. We've got 8 more slots, $100 each. Join us this Saturday. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. 97 likes. Well, 160 people on live earlier. So don't forget to like the show before you leave. It helps with the algorithms. And if you want to support the show on a monthly basis, which is my preferred way of supporting the show, then go to YaronBrookShow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribestar, or even Locals, and support the Yaron Brook Show. Thanks, guys. I will see you Thursday.